on Friday as well. And that line of rain is a cold front which swings across all areas, tied into this area of low pressure, which will bring plenty of showers in western areas this weekend and a much cooler feel, with particularly across Northern Ireland, some gusty winds.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You know, I was shocked by that story of the Slovakian slave masters who had trawled decrepit care homes to traffic over 40 orphans to work at car washes in Bristol. The images of the horrible conditions they were forced to live in, the tragedy of their hopes of a promised new life turning into a living hell, hundreds of miles from their country. It should have shocked the nation. But let's face it, nobody's taking a knee. Nobody is shouting, Slovak Lives Matter. Nobody is crying out about the abuse suffered or the cruel exploitation, because the victims don't fit the mould. No, instead, people are getting nail extensions done in dodgy bars by women whose lives are no better, and their cars hand-polished by men who probably suffer equally wretched lives. They'll watch adult films online of abused and trafficked girls and order their throwaway fast fashion cheaply made in sweatshops. For a world so obsessed with slavery 500 years ago, we seem disgustingly silent about it when it takes place below our very noses. It's time for the Alex Agenda. Well, there's nothing better than a shiny countdown clock and a statometer to distract everybody from woe. And that's what Jacob Rees-Mogg is unveiling. The member for the 19th century has gone digital with his online dashboard showing how many pesky EU laws are being scrapped every month to enrich British business with Brexity goodness. Every little frayed ribbon of severed red tape will be documented, with some 2,400 bits of regulation coming under the Brexit Opportunity Minister's onerous gaze. Not a French-style revolution with blood running in the streets and the terror of the guillotine, he said, but a British-style revolution whereby marginal improvements move inch by inch, so that soon we've covered the feet and the feet become yards and the yards become chains and furlongs until the journey is complete. Now, would-be Republican American presidential candidate Nikki Haley has weighed in over the Northern Ireland Protocol and, for once, told Biden to butt out. Oh, the Democrats have long been interfering in Brexit negotiations, from Obama to Clinton to Biden. But Haley, who was ambassador to the UN, said she loved a bit of Brexit and wished more countries would follow our lead, having seen the EU's bullying and selfish ways up close. Well, let's hope Nikki, who is currently only on 4% of Republican backing if Trump stays in the mix, somehow manages to grow support across the pond, because it's high time Britain felt like we had theirs. The OCR exam board has overhauled its poetry anthology for English GCSEs, binning Keats, Heaney, Larkin and Wilfred Owen in a push to diversify the collection and make it all BLM LGBTQ++ approved. The whole point of poetry is that it's a window into the soul, into our history and into our heritage. And I'm really appalled that the conflict section no longer contains a single English First World War poet. Scrapping the wokeifying English literature is an insult to our world-leading canon and will continue to alienate kids from the very country they're living in. An anthem for doomed youth, indeed. And it turns out that when it comes to fossils, most of the stuff we collect and put on display is male. A survey of national history relics seems to have found the female of the species is often wanting when it comes to representation. Well, it's not a theme peculiar to dusty science museums either. A critical eye cast over the BBC newsroom might also show a dominance of crusty old men. Patrick, what do you make of some of those points?
Well, I don't think the underrepresentation of female fossils is going to bother too many voters. I very much agree with your point about in effect, modern slavery going on at the bottom end of the labour market, and it's particularly, as you say, hand car washes, sometimes nail bars. We've heard about textile industry, sweatshops as well. And again, I think, are the police, for politically correct reasons, reluctant to intrude? Because, again, you've got sort of quite tightly knit ethnic minority communities which have some of their members being exploited by others. So the hand car wash thing, I think, is an odd one, because 20, 30 years ago, we reached a level of mechanisation where everyone went to the car wash and there was a whiz-bang machine. So with technology proceeding apace, how come labour has become so cheap that it's actually made that sort of hand car wash viable again? So that's an industry I've always had a bit of a suspicion about in general. On Brexit, of course, and here we are 6 years to the day since that brilliant win, the point I would make is that you mentioned that Jacob Rees-Mogg drew parallel with the French Revolution. Well, there's the old joke about the French Revolution. Is it a success? And someone replies, it's too early to tell. Well, it's definitely too early to tell with Brexit, because we only actually even technically left the EU in the end of January 2020. We didn't actually come out of its rules and structures until December the 31st, 2020, and both those things happened in the middle of this massive pandemic.
One of the funny little proposals that he suggested is, now we've left the EU, Brussels mandates that sparkling wine must be in glass bottles. And he said, well, now we can put it in plastic bottles. But it turns out it requires the same amount of pressure as the tyres of a large van.
Right.
And it would probably require a pretty robust polymer to contain it.
Funnily enough, I've got my own Jacob Rees-Mogg wine story, because I went to a Brexit debate with him. I was on the same panel, and afterwards, and one of the things that had come up was the food and drink sector, and afterwards I said to him about the opportunities for bringing in new world wines with lower tariffs, New Zealand or Australian, South Africa, and he looked at me and went, oh yes, but I only drink French wine. So he's got a big vested interest in French.
Patrick will be talking a lot about Brexit in the second part of the show. Thank you so much for your thoughts. You're at GB News, and there's lots more still to come in the next hour, so stay with us. Well, this is We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we're getting stuck into the big issues of the day. And still with me this hour is political commentator, writer and former MEP Patrick O'Flynn. And here's what we've got coming up in the second part of the show. Britain off the rails. The network grinds to a halt on a second day of strike action by the RMT union. Plus, Dame Deborah James doesn't shy away from talking about bowel cancer. But despite it being the second biggest cancer killer in the UK, there's a warning that over half of UK adults aren't taking up screening offers. And happy birthday, Brexit. Patrick and I will be marking 6 years since the good people of the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union. What have we achieved? And what more should we be doing? That's what we're talking about for the next hour. But what do you need to talk about? Email me, gbnews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GBNews. First, it's time for the GB News headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. More travel chaos is set to hit the UK, with British Airways workers at Heathrow Airport voting in favour of strike action in a dispute over pay. That as rail passengers face yet more disruption over the summer, with another union planning to ballot staff next week for a further round of strikes. Tens of thousands of workers have walked off the job for the second time this week following a dispute over pay and conditions. More industrial action is planned for Saturday. Negotiations continue, but the RMT's Assistant General Secretary John Leach says the current offer needs to be improved.
I'm going in anticipation and hope that they're going to put a proper and decent offer on the table. But the thing is, let's talk about what is on the table. 2%, job insecurity, thousands of job cuts, ticket office closures, new contracts, fire and rehire. That's not on. They've got to have a complete reset. And more importantly, probably than anything else, the government have got to get behind the railway men and women of this country and resource and give the authority to the management to negotiate a fair deal.
Well, Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng says there is a fair offer on the table.
People who are striking, preventing kids from taking exams, preventing people from getting to work, should really actually look at what they're doing and actually, I think, come to some sort of reasonable arrangement. I don't think it's the case that the government has been unreasonable. I think the strikers are the ones who are being unreasonable.
The Prime Minister is urging people to keep an open mind about the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. In the country's capital for the Commonwealth Leaders Summit, Boris Johnson says critics need to understand there's been a huge amount of due diligence. He defended the plan ahead of his meeting with Prince Charles, who reportedly described the policy as appalling.
We did a huge amount of due diligence on the legal processes, on the safety here in Rwanda, with the safety levels which are extremely high. And I think actually that is why the policy continues to, it has not been ruled unlawful in any UK court. Actually, it hasn't even been ruled unlawful in the Strasbourg court. And we're just going to keep going. And what I would just urge people is keep an open mind.
2 people have been charged with conspiring to arrange the travel of a child into the UK to harvest organs. A 60-year-old man and 55-year-old woman, both from Nigeria, have been remanded in custody. They're due to appear at Uxbridge Magistrates Court. The child has been taken into care. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the name of the soldier who was killed during a training exercise on Salisbury Plain. Second Lieutenant Max George of 5th Battalion, the Rifles, suffered serious head injuries after being involved in a collision with a Warrior armoured vehicle on Tuesday. His death is being investigated by police. The Met Police is being re-investigated over the way it handled its inquiry into serial killer Stephen Port's victims. Port murdered 4 young men in Barking, East London, and is serving a whole life sentence. A 2021 inquest found police failures probably contributed to the deaths of 3 of his victims. Scotland Yard has acknowledged the failings and says it will support the new inquiry. Afghan authorities are still struggling to reach a remote area after yesterday's earthquake, which killed at least 1,000 people. 1,500 others were injured as the 6.1 magnitude quake struck, destroying homes in the eastern part of the country. It's the deadliest earthquake to hit Afghanistan in 2 decades. The United Nations is calling for financial aid, urging world leaders to provide humanitarian support. Parents are being urged to check that their children are vaccinated against polio, with data showing thousands aren't fully protected. It comes after traces of the virus, which was eradicated in the UK in 2003, were found in sewage samples in East London. Figures show of the 700,000 children in England, 15% hadn't received their booster by their 5th birthday last year. Around a third of them were in the capital. And the first joint portrait of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge has been unveiled. Painted by award-winning artist Jamie Carth, it was commissioned last year as a gift for the people of Cambridgeshire. It's on public display at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Alex.
The public are on our side, audaciously claimed Eddie Dempsey, the RMT Union's Assistant General Secretary, as rail workers go on strike again today, grinding swathes of the nation's network to a halt. Well, I kind of think that depends on who you ask, matey boy. You probably won't find much love from holidaymakers missing their flights, or someone having to hitchhike to hospital. Nor will people paying your workers' wages with their taxes, who don't get a sniff at the sort of protections the public sector often enjoys, be all too sympathetic with the cause. And even the Corbyn-loving, placard-waving, great unwashed who descend upon Glastonbury every year to virtue signal in a sea of each other's faeces may no longer be your biggest fans either. But perhaps the Whitehall Woketrons working from home may well applaud the havoc you are causing for everyone else, hoping they too can cash in on a pay rise while the rest of the country struggles. Our GB News reporters are live in London and Hull with the latest. But first, let's go to Paul Hawkins at Waterloo Station, because I understand there's news of a strike in another sector.
Yeah, not on the railways. This is in the airline industry. British Airways staff in the past sort of 20 minutes or so have voted. 700 of them have voted to strike. There was an 81% turnout, 95% in favour of striking at some point over the summer holidays. Now, British Airways staff fly from, this will affect Terminals 3 and 5 at Heathrow. This is check-in staff, ground crew. They have voted. The thrust of the dispute, they voted because there was a 10% reverse in pay over the pandemic. They want that put back up. They say that the airline hasn't agreed to it, and so they've voted for industrial action. Now, we know that the airline industry generally has had problems with staffing as demand has increased post-pandemic. They haven't quite kept up with staffing, and there have been flight cancellations already by British Airways at Heathrow. So one would have thought that this will have more of an impact, even exacerbating the problem over the summer. British Airways, for their part, say that a 10% payment for this year was rejected, but they do say that they will be able to cope with managers stepping in to fill staff roles during the strikes. We don't have dates on those strikes yet, but that is the breaking news in the past half an hour, that 700 staff at British Airways due to go on strike, mainly affecting Terminals 3 and 5 over the summer. So even more problems for the airline industry over the summer, and probably more interruption for people's holidays.
Paul, thank you for the update. Our North Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley is in Hull. What's the picture like up there, Anna?
Good afternoon, Alex. Well, Hull has been one of the worst hit cities across the country for these rail strikes, being shut down for the next 3 days of the strikes. It's second day today. It's closed on Tuesday and closed again on Saturday. So there's no rail passengers coming through. They've been forewarned. There's locks on the gates behind me, and there's signs up advising people not to travel. Now, there has been the RMT Union picket line this morning onto this afternoon. They were outside at the picket line, and I spoke to Labour MP Carl Turner. He joined the union members in solidarity for the strike, and this is what he had to say.
None of them have lifted a finger to settle this dispute. If Keir Starmer was the Prime Minister, he'd be insisting that the Shadow Secretary of State is round the table with the trade unions, negotiating in good faith to settle the dispute, which is completely avoidable. People are supportive. Blokes just walked up to me and said, "Can I have a word with you? I support this strike." I've never ever expected to be saying I support this strike, but we all work for a living, and actually we have to be saying to government we can't afford to work for less, for longer hours, but get paid less.
Carl Turner there, the MP for Hull East, turning out to this strike action, and he's saying that people here are supporting the strike, and that is something that other passengers have told me here. I just spoke to a lady earlier. She said it took her 5 hours to get here. It'd normally be a 3-hour rail journey. She got here on different buses, but she was actually in support of what the workers are doing.
Anna, thank you so much. Paul, thank you to you as well for that breaking news. Oh, Patrick, it's just more miserable news, isn't it? I mean, airports, backlog Britain, airports have been a nightmare for months now. Loads of people's summer holidays ruined. It's chaos in some of the big airports. And now this on top of it. I mean, you know, what next?
Yes, and obviously originally the COVID disruptions and the change of status, and people thought they were clear to fly to places, and the rules changed again. So we've had about 3 years of anyone attempting to fly abroad on holiday, taking a massive gamble that they weren't going to be stranded, sort of lying on metal benches overnight. And, people will feel very fed up that the BA staff are planning to strike at some point over the school holidays. And again, that's obviously designed to cause maximum disruption, but there's no point in complaining about it, because that's what rationally, that's what strikers do. There's no point in them going on strike when it's not going to be making a difference. They will pick the peak time when the revenue streams of their employers are going to get hit worse and the PR pressure is going to be highest. So long as we sort these things out through, fairly 1970s flavoured industrial relations, you are going to see strikes happening at exactly the worst time. So, my heart goes out to those hard-working families who are already paying through the nose, who have to take school-age children on holiday at peak times, and they get sort of fleeced by going then. And the idea that actually they might never get out of the airport is very depressing.
And arguably, it'll be their taxes that will be paying off the furlough that the government gave airline workers during the pandemic. I mean, they are saying that they had a 10% pay cut imposed upon them at the peak of the pandemic. That has not been reversed. And if that is true, then that does seem rather unfair. And you can understand the discontent of those workers. But at the same time, a lot of these jobs in the transport sector were papered over and covered by the government with a very generous furlough scheme that taxpayers afforded.
Yes, I think I heard a statistic the other day that globally the aviation industry has lost something like £200 billion worth of revenue through the various COVID shutdowns. And, they have to look at their business model and making it viable again. The same, by the way, is true of the railways, where the old days of millions of people having a season ticket to travel at, quote, peak time, that revenue stream is much smaller than it used to be, and they have to work out how to make it pay as well. So
in these circumstances, pain can be gain for them. And I understand that next year the projection for the airline industry is, with the increasing cost of tickets to cover this disruption, the shortage of flights, actually they could be set to enjoying pre-pandemic profits again.
Right. Well, they would probably say they've got plenty of catching up still to do. I do, let's be realistic. If you have taken a 10% pay cut and then you're facing 10% inflation on top of that, that is that's a 20% living standard cut, roughly speaking. But also out of your disposable income, it'd be a much bigger share. You might only say have a third of your income after paying for necessities, and that's taking away most of that. So you can quite understand why workers are thinking this isn't on. And when you do see a very high percentage of a workforce voting for a strike, it's usually a bit of a clue that they are feeling hard done by.
Yeah, and do you think that we've got a problem in this country? When I was covering the strike story on Tuesday, came to my attention that in the UK, the ratio of average workers' pay to the pay of bosses, the pay of CEOs, is enormous. It's around 63 times more that management gets, higher than the lowest paid worker. The last time we had this sort of industrial action in the 70s, it was 10 to 1, that ratio. Something's gone horribly wrong when the burden is being carried by those at the bottom.
Yeah, I don't think you have to be an out-and-out lefty to see that, you know, the so-called benefits of globalisation haven't been equally shared. So you have had cheap labour brought in, which has widened sort of profit margins, which has gone to typically senior executives and board members as a sort of incentive-based reward. So their pay has gone skyrocketing, whereas the average British working person is barely any better off at all. So there are strains in this model of capitalism is not delivering the goods anymore for millions of people. And you know, perhaps in globalization terms, you know, to be a poor person in a poor country, you've seen your living standards rise. But a rich person in a rich country, you've gone through the roof. But to have been a poor person in a rich country hasn't been great. To be on the shop floor, you haven't seen anything like living standards rises that other groups have had.
Patrick, thanks. Yeah, and as some wise egg said during the pandemic, why is it that profits are always privatised but the risk is nationalised? I want to know your views. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews. You are with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, it's been brought to public attention by Bowel babe Dame Deborah James, but bowel cancer is the nation's second biggest cancer killer, and not enough of us are getting screened. We'll be speaking to an expert. Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The rest of today bringing big contrasts for many. Warm, hazy sunshine, but for a few, heavy, thundery downpours. Here's the bigger picture. Pincer movement going on with a couple of weather fronts. This one in particular already brought a few showers, but increasingly we're going to see big downpours develop. Very hit and miss. Many places won't see them, but we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place because where we do see thunderstorms, large hail, gusty winds and the potential for flooding is possible. Now, the showers will drift further northwards, easing off as they do, but some heavy showers possible across eastern Scotland overnight, turning generally dry across much of the south. Quite a warm, humid, sticky night with temperatures staying in the mid-teens into Friday, and it's again going to be a bit of a messy one. Some places, certainly southern Scotland, northern England, starting with some sunshine, but a fair bit of cloud for Wales and southwest England with some showers here. And then again through the day, we need to watch some heavy thundery showers breaking out, most likely over northern England, particularly to the east of the Pennines, extending into southeast Scotland. Some big downpours again possible. Some sunshine, not as warm as the last couple of days, but still into the mid-20s across the east. We'll see rain pushing into Northern Ireland, and that is a sign of a bigger change as we go through Friday evening. That rain for Wales and southwest England, and then spreading bodily eastwards. That is a weather front which will be introducing cooler and fresher air. So if you're not enjoying the heat and humidity at the moment, it's looking a lot fresher for the weekend. Still some sunshine around, especially on Saturday down the eastern side. Elsewhere, well, the sun will be interspersed with showers. Plenty of showers around on Saturday, some heavy ones moving in, but tending to zip through because it will also be very gusty, unseasonably gusty for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. And by Saturday, it's fresher everywhere. It's going to be a similar story, fresher with a mix of sunshine and showers on Sunday. Goodbye.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Bowel cancer is the fourth most common cancer in the UK, with nearly 120 new cases reported daily. You likely know someone who has had it. I've lost two people to the disease, my beloved grandma and my friend Sam, who tragically died, aged only 33. It's also the second most common cancer death. Yet half of UK adults never take up a screening invitation and often choose to ignore signs that something may be wrong, perhaps embarrassed about seeking help when it comes to problems with poo. In fact, 1 in 15 men and 1 in 18 women will get it, with half of the cases preventable and largely down to poor diet and health. Since Bowel babe Dame Deborah James went public with her own heartbreaking battle against the disease, some of that taboo has been bravely smashed, but more still needs to be done to keep people aware of the symptoms so they can get the treatment to help keep them alive. Joining me on the show to talk about this is oncologist and former chief of the World Health Organization's cancer program, Dr. Carol Sikora. Fantastic to have you on. Are people still uncomfortable talking about these issues?
They are. And bowel cancer is the most difficult one. Breast cancer is sort of socially acceptable. People know where the breast is. They understand it's a female basic disease. But bowel cancer affects both sexes more or less equally. And the problem is that the compliance, the uptake of the screening test that has been around now for nearly a decade is much lower than for, say, mammograms for breast cancer in women or for cervical cancer screening. The test is a little unpleasant. You have to collect a bit of poo and put a stick on it, and it measures the amount of blood there. It's a pretty crude test, and if it's positive, you have an endoscopy where a tube's passed up the back passage to look inside. Early cancer of the bowel is totally curable, 95%, but late cancer, once it spreads, is almost definitely a death sentence. So catching cancer, this type of cancer early, is really important.
Who's eligible to go for those cancer screenings at present?
I think the difficulty is it's a home test. You don't have to make an appointment. You don't have to go anywhere. If it's positive, obviously you do. The test is not totally reliable. There's lots of causes of blood in the poo, the commonest being piles or an abrasion because you've been constipated and so on, and the lining leaks a little bit of blood. The test is very sophisticated now. It doesn't just detect blood, it detects blood that's been destroyed by enzymes, so it's likely that it's come from further up the bowel. The commonest site of bowel cancer is actually in the descending colon, where the colon turns round and joins the rectum. That's the commonest site. So picking that up early would really be life-saving for a lot of people.
And do you think people, when they might have digestive issues, tend to think, well, you know, because you might have a squiffy stomach from something you've eaten or a bit of a stomach bug, or perhaps your diet's been a bit poor, which has affected the nature of your stools, that people might have a tendency to ignore some of the early warning signs?
Well, we all get funny bowel symptoms. You just go out for a good night on the town and you come back feeling pretty rough and maybe a bit of tummy pain, a bit of noise, a bit of bubbling going on. But it's when things persist, and more importantly, when they progress and persist. In other words, they just every day you feel a bit worse. You feel maybe you lose a bit of weight, you've got a bit of diarrhea one day, a bit of constipation the next day, and you just don't feel right. Or you get some bloating in the tummy where the tummy swells up for no reason. These are the sorts of things you really have to go to the GP. It's a hassle. I know that GPs are difficult to get to see, but if you go along, they can check you out, they can examine you, and if necessary, refer you within 2 weeks to see a specialist that will make or deny the diagnosis, which is what you want. You need to get it all sorted out. Women are more forward about doing that than men in this country. In other countries, it's about equal, but here, women are much better at looking after themselves, and they're sort of the family doctor for their families normally, and they encourage husbands and sons to actually go and seek medical help, and that's really important.
Dr. Cowsacor, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this hugely important topic. I really do appreciate it and all of your hard work. Well, let's go back to my studio guest, Patrick O'Flynn. I mean, bowel cancer kills more men than women. Men less likely, however, to go to the doctor when it comes to what they might perceive to be embarrassing conditions. What's going on there? What goes on in men's minds?
Well, I'm probably as guilty as anyone that the threshold of pain or discomfort before you actually admit you might need to go and see a doctor it just seems to be that bit higher. I suppose many men go many years, if touch wood they're in good health as young men, without needing to see a doctor. And there's perhaps something in the male psyche that, particularly as a younger man, one considers oneself kind of immortal, able to do anything, and then you're not in the habit of consulting and seeing your GP regularly, which I think most women are, particularly ones who've have pregnancies. Once childbirth and motherhood comes in, I think regular visits to various health professionals just becomes second nature. So that's all I can think, really. I must say that Dame Deborah James, potentially by raising the profile of this cancer, which I didn't know very much about, and about the numbers of people dying from it, she potentially will save, hundreds of lives, although tragically not her own.
Yeah, no, you're right. Patrick, thank you ever so much. You're with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, would Putin really go nuclear? We'll assess the risk from the Russian president's Satan II missile. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
It's 3:30. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. More travel chaos is set to hit the UK over the summer, with British Airways staff at Heathrow Airport voting in favour of strike action in a dispute over pay. That as railway passengers face yet more disruption, with another union planning to ballot staff next week for a further round of strikes. Tens of thousands of workers have walked off the job for the second time this week following a dispute over pay and conditions. More industrial action is planned for Saturday. The Prime Minister is urging people to keep an open mind about the government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. In the country's capital for the Commonwealth Leaders Summit, Boris Johnson says critics need to understand there's been a huge amount of due diligence. He defended the plan ahead of his meeting with Prince Charles, who reportedly described the policy as appalling. A Nigerian politician's one of two people accused of plotting to harvest the organs of a child in the UK. The 60-year-old man and a 55-year-old woman appeared in court charged with conspiracy to arrange the travel of a person with a view to exploit them. The child has been taken into care. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed 2nd Lieutenant Max George of 5th Battalion the Rifles was killed during a training exercise on Salisbury Plain. He suffered serious head injuries after being involved in a collision with a warrior-armed vehicle on Tuesday. His death is being investigated by police. And the Met Police is being re-investigated over the way it handled its inquiry into serial killer Stephen Port's victims. It follows a 2021 inquest which found police failures probably contributed to the deaths of 3 of the 4 men. Scotland Yard has acknowledged the failings and says it will support the new inquiry. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.227 US and 1.165 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,500 and 89 pence per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, his hypersonic nuclear warhead, Satan II, is allegedly set to be deployed by the end of the year and could strike Britain in just 3 minutes. It's the latest threat from Putin as he continues to use every tactic in his blood-curdling playbook to bully the world as he wages war in Ukraine. With blockades of grain shipments set to spark an international food crisis, if not lifted within a month, and rising fuel costs creating economic misery, Putin is no stranger to threats and blackmail. But how worried should we really be? Meanwhile, today, EU leaders meet to offer Ukraine membership of the bloc, something that for now is largely symbolic. But is it a whitewash as Europe continues to give 30 times more to Russia for fuel than it does to Ukraine in support? And how much longer will this war drag on? Or could there be a swift and deadly end? Well, joining me now to talk about this is Philip Ingram, who's a former senior military intelligence officer and NATO planner. Philip, always love having you on the show. Talk to us about Satan II and the latest rhetoric coming out of Russia.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's rhetoric. All intercontinental ballistic missiles have a hypersonic phase. What they do is they launch up into space. In space, they will distribute a series of independently steerable re-entry nuclear warheads, and then they drop down on a target. So they can target the UK at the moment within minutes with the missiles that they've got. Of course, the West is monitoring for any missile launches anywhere in the globe at any time. So and we've got a permanent at-sea independent nuclear deterrent, as do the Americans and as do the French. So if they tried anything like this, there are processes and procedures in place where retaliatory action would be virtually automatic. And Putin knows that. That's why there hasn't been a nuclear war since the end of the Second World War, and that's why there's unlikely to be one.
Yeah, it seems to me that Putin constantly wants to saber rattle, to create a kind of terror, to force other nations into submission. But it's really not working, is it? I mean, he's a bit like the boy who cries wolf. He's constantly coming up with these threats via state-controlled Russian media, via people like Medvedev. And yet, well, the world's starting to ignore him on that front.
It's a constant part of the doctrine. It's maskirovka, which is masking, all about deception, all about trying to saber rattle, and Varanya, which is just telling lies, and he's very, very good at that. And this is what they do. But it does upset certain countries because it creates division within countries that have not very strong political sort of support within them. So you get coalitions like in Germany. It can upset some of the coalition partners very easy. And Putin is using everything that he can in the information sphere, from the saber rattling with the big threats right down to influencing political decision-making, disruption inside different countries and all the rest of it. And he's putting all that together. And he's actually quite good at it.
Now, let's cast our attention across the channel to Europe, because, of course, the EU are set to welcome Ukraine as potentially a new member today. EU leaders meeting to discuss that. Do you think that this is, a good idea? I mean, essentially it's symbolic. It's going to take a heck of a long time, one imagines, for Ukraine to meet the conditions, be they economic or in terms of transparency and anti-corruption, to get full membership. But is there a risk that this also is whitewashing some of the, say, heel-dragging by the EU over really supporting Ukraine as perhaps it should be?
I don't think it's heel-dragging. I think it is providing support for Ukraine in the political sphere, and that will be putting additional pressure on Vladimir Putin. You're right in saying that it's going to take a long time before Ukraine will become a full member. North Macedonia got into the candidate status in 2005, I think, and are still not a full member. And Ukraine has been given a very clear roadmap as to what they need to achieve. And it's the sort of thing that President Zelensky was elected on. One of the biggest things is the corruption that existed throughout the country beforehand. Most of those involved in corruption are now in the front line, so have got a different focus. But that gives President Zelensky a real opportunity to achieve the standards that he needs to get a more rapid EU membership. Not every member of the EU is as enthusiastic about welcoming Ukraine as some, but it is a strong political statement.
Now, let's refer back to, I mentioned in my introduction, the looming food crisis. I understand there's essentially 1 month, really, that we have to get this grain out of Ukraine somehow to go to parts of the world that desperately need it, or we're going to be facing famines. Are countries such as Turkey ready to work with its NATO allies on this matter? I mean, they've been deliberately belligerent about Sweden and Finland's membership of application to NATO. Are they ready to stand up and help, say, the British Navy and other Mediterranean countries make sure that grain can be escorted out of Ukraine's ports?
Well, I don't think any navy is going to set up, a free passage zone for grain to come out of Ukraine's ports with the Russian threat that's there. And Ukraine will be worried about lifting their minds whilst the Russian threat is there. In the same way that we're having difficulty putting a no-fly zone over Ukraine because it would bring us potentially into direct conflict with Russia. So the grain issue and the cooking oil issue is a massive one, especially for the third world, and that will have massive unintended consequences, which is why the war, Russia's war in Ukraine, is a global conflict, because it is going to affect some of the poorest people in the world who are going to be starving to death. That will create more refugees and more people seeking asylum. That will put more pressure on different countries around the world, and this will go on for a long period of time.
And before we let you go, Philip, we were discussing just before this story bowel cancer and the fact that people aren't taking up screenings for it. And I understand that you are a survivor yourself of bowel cancer. Tell us your story.
I am. I got diagnosed in September last year after a routine test as you go to give blood. I've got an unusual blood group. It picked up that my hemoglobin was too low. And I went to my GP. GP sent me for another test and then started tutting when the test came back. And I was then rapidly put through the NHS testing program, identified with what I thought was a fairly late diagnosis, bowel cancer, in a position in my bowel which doesn't usually give any symptoms. And had surgery in December. It was all taken out perfectly well. I was, if it's not too much detail, replumbed perfectly. And whenever the laboratory analysed the tumour, they found it was at the lowest possible grade. So they got it at the earliest possible stage. So anything that raises awareness, that gets people to go and get themselves checked, this can be dealt with very quickly and very successfully. And I don't need any follow-up treatment. I'll be a guinea pig for testing for as long as they want to keep testing me, but that just keeps me safe.
And we're glad you were kept safe, because we really treasure you on this programme. Philip Ingram, thank you for joining us once again. Always fascinating to hear your thoughts. Well, happy Independence Day! 6 years ago today, you lot went to polling stations around the nation to take part in one of the biggest decisions this country has ever taken. Let's look back at Boris Johnson's rallying call on the eve of the EU referendum vote.
We vote Leave and take back control. I believe that this Thursday can be our country's Independence Day.
Say what you like about Boris Johnson. I was watching that amazing speech earlier on today. It still brings tears to my eyes. It really does. It makes me super proud of what we managed to achieve in that campaign. A campaign where you were told the skies would fall in, that Britain would be isolated and weakened on the global stage, that nobody would cross the channel to come here anymore, and supermarket shelves would be empty. Well, it seems we've managed to dodge apocalypse despite the pandemic and subsequent economic meltdown. But what big Brexity bonuses have we got 6 years on from that historic vote? And what do we need? Well, who better to talk to about this than my studio guest today, Patrick O'Flynn. Patrick, you're part of the old Brexit vanguard, campaigning to leave the EU before the word Brexit even existed. 6 years on, are you looking at where we are going? I'm really glad I did that.
Yes, absolutely, because for me it was fundamentally about democracy and sovereignty and having accountable governments making decisions that if the voters didn't like, they could kick them out. And that wasn't going to happen while we are ruled by the proverbial bunch of old guys in Belgium, unelected at the European Commission. So in terms of what we've achieved since Brexit, I think it's very hard to envisage that we would have had our separate vaccine programme had we still been in the European Union, not least because the European Medicines Agency, the bureaucratic, sluggish thing, was based in London at the time. So I personally think that that early start on vaccines saved many thousands of lives. We got rid of the tampon tax. We don't have free movement anymore, but the government, for various reasons, has not decided to run a more restrictive immigration policy. That's something, that they can be answerable to the British public. I think we also have to recognise that we've had some enormous crises. Sorry, the COVID thing, which literally blew up almost like the day after we technically left the European Union, and has had, I would estimate, an effect on our economic conditions about 50 times the size of any change in trading arrangements that Brexit has caused. I think it absorbed a lot of, to use that horrible jargon phrase, bandwidth in government. And so we belatedly have Jacob Rees-Mogg coming up with some ideas for things we can do differently.
But I mean, I'm glad you mentioned things like the vaccine rollout, and of course we were just discussing Ukraine there, because it's clear that, in these crises, the EU has not showered itself in glory, something that the EU often manages to not do, especially in a crisis. But also, when it comes to us dealing with a crisis, an economic crisis right now, it strikes me that given that we've got this newfound economic freedom, we should be using some of it. And repeatedly I have people coming on this show saying Brexit gave us the ability to do things like cut corporation tax to help grow us out of economic woes, to cut VAT on things like fuel when people need that most. Why are we not getting that? Is this because actually we've got people in government who weren't really the true believers? I never saw Sunak on a campaign trail, and Boris famously didn't know which way to go at the beginning.
Well, to be fair, I think a lot of Brexit voters weren't people who bought into this image of what was called Singapore on Thames with a kind of reheated Thatcherism and shrink the state. That was a sort of small percentage of them. I do think, yes, I would like to see VAT on your power bills scrapped, and we can do that. But I think, to be fair, the government decided for good or ill to spend 400 billion quid getting everyone, through the COVID pandemic. It did avoid the economy just completely slumping and mass unemployment, but it's massively weakened the public finances. And, the Treasury people who are whispering in Sunak's ears, they don't like this, what's known as Reaganite economics, where you just keep cutting taxes and you say, well, a year down the line, more revenue is going to come in because of growth. Well, sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm actually critical of Boris Johnson for many things, but I think given where he came in at, with Theresa May completely handcuffing us, the Remainers in Parliament stopping us getting out, I think he's actually done a decent job on Brexit, and I remain grateful to him for the courage he showed. And it's a sort of brownie points for Boris every time he's messing up on another issue.
Yeah, and hopefully lots more Brexity goodness to come. Patrick, thank you. Of course, we did wait about 40 years to get a referendum, then after the result, waited ages to even be allowed it. So we can wait a bit longer for all those Brexity bonuses, I'm sure. Now, ask most people who work with me, and they'll tell you, yeah, I can be annoyingly perky. I realised a while ago that, by and large, we can actually... Oh, look at me, so happy to sit in front of the Union flag. Most of the time, we can choose if we want to be merry or a misery guts. I'm convinced about that. Well, new research has revealed that over a third of Brits have forgotten what it means to be truly happy since the pandemic, with nearly half admitting it's more than 2 years since they felt true happiness. Dear Lord, what's up, Britain? Let's give you a big cuddle and try and find out. Well, joining me now is Gretchen Rubin, best-selling and award-winning author of Happiness, who commissioned this research. Gretchen, what is going on? Why is everyone so miserable? Surely it's easy to be happy. You just think, I'm going to try and be happy.
Well, I think one thing that this report recently released from Oracle shows is that, the fear and uncertainty of the last 2 years, the social disconnection, the upheaval really has affected people's happiness all over the world. And we're now trying to come out of it, but people took a big hit in their happiness during that time.
So what can people do on a day-to-day basis to try and get happier? Because those statistics, they're pretty sad.
Well, ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists agree that if you had to pick just one aspect of life to work on to be happier, you would think about relationships, because to be happy, we need deep, intimate bonds. We need to feel like we belong. We need to be able to get support, and just as important, give support. And so if we're trying to think about how to spend our precious time, energy, or money, if we want to boost our happiness, anything that broadens our relationships or deepens our relationships is probably going to make us happier. And maybe that's something like stopping to talk to a neighbor while you're walking your dog, or talking to a clerk in a store, or something bigger like volunteering or reaching out to family members or friends that you've kind of lost touch with. Really, it's relationships that are probably the biggest secret to happiness.
Do you think there's any truth in the idea that perhaps the modern world today is just a lot more miserable because everything's labelled a catastrophe, everything's about identity politics, that actually if you're going to get any sort of social capital, you've got to have a victim status of some form, and that actually we've just started looking at everything through a pessimistic prism?
Well, that's such an interesting question. And there's a lot of research done as to like now versus in the past. And I have to say, for my own purposes, I'm more interested in right now. Like, what can we do right now to be happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative? One of the interesting things I thought this research showed was that one place people look for a little lift is to brands. That people, as they go about their day, they want to smile, they want to have a little laugh, and that they'll often look to like advertising campaigns, marketing, customer service, which I guess makes sense because these are touch points as part of our ordinary life as we're going through our day. And sometimes just getting just a little funny thing can change your perspective, not in a transcendent way, but in a moment-to-moment way. It gives us a little lift.
Oh, you gave me a little lift just then, Gretchen Rubin. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. Well, joining us now is comedian Leo Kearse. You always give me a little lift, Leo. You're a funny man. Are you a happy person?
No, I don't think I am happy. And I think as British people, we're not supposed to be happy. This isn't California. We're supposed to be miserable. It rains all the time. Also, I think happiness is overrated. No great art or great progress has been made by somebody who's happy. If you're happy and content, you'll just sit and do what you're expected to do. You won't be striving for anything. Joy is the enemy of progress.
But do you get a degree of sort of joy out of your unhappiness at the very least?
Not really. No, I think I'm completely motivated by spite. I just want to succeed to annoy people who've slighted me in the past. I just want to rise to a position of power so I can crush my enemies.
And do you find like really happy people irritating as a result?
Yeah, of course they're irritating. This is Britain. We're not. If you're stuck behind somebody who's incredibly happy in a queue, it's hell on earth. You want to. There's solace. There's community in misery.
Patrick, are you miserable? Are you a grumpy old Brit?
I veer. I like being out in the natural world, staring out to sea. Things like that make me happy. But I must admit, I do share a bit of the idea that seeing your enemy suffer if you're feeling in a grumpy mood is quite cheering as well.
Who would you most like to see suffer to lift your spirit?
Oh my God! Could we fill a cruise ship? And then sink it. I love the natural world as well. I love going out there and seeing the animals tear each other apart. It's
Yeah, I lived in Kenya. I used to enjoy that as well. But do you think there is this problem in the modern world that everyone's constantly looking for something that they can complain about their life, that there is so much capital set in, poor Gary Lineker had to pretend to have racist abuse the other day to try and get back in headlines.
Nobody's suffered racism like Gary Lineker. Tonight I'm going to be taking the knee for Gary Lineker in memory of all that he's suffered. I think people do like to moan, but on social media it's the opposite problem. Everybody's painting their lives as if it's perfect, and you don't see the cracks and the sort of bad tempers behind it. Everybody's presenting themselves as if they're on some sort of wonderful reality TV show.
But that makes people miserable, doesn't it? I ban social media tomorrow. I think it's really bad for people's general mental health.
Well, I'm told, and I must be one of the only people in the country who's never been on Facebook, but I'm told that Facebook is just this litany of boasting and fake kind of good times, and here I am in this amazing holiday place, and it actually does increase the anxiety of a lot of people who are seeing apparently their acquaintances having these sort of millionaire jet set lifestyles. And then quite often it then turns out that the relationship crashes and it was all kind of built on lies anyway.
Yeah, they were just leaning against somebody else's Lamborghini they saw in the street.
Yeah, no, you get a lot of creepy guys doing that on dating apps. Not that I would know. I'm happily settled down. Guys, thank you so much. You make me very happy. Every time I watch you on TV, you make me happy when you come and keep me company in the studio. And frankly, I'm one of those really annoying, happy people. So, you know, suck it up, I say. Thanks, Leo. Thanks, Patrick. You've been watching We Need to Talk About with me, Alex Phillips. And if I've got a tip of the day, it's this. I always walk to work through nature. It's an hour. I know it's quite a long time, perhaps a luxury, but I burn calories, save money, and I get to see loads of creatures in Hyde Park, and sometimes I even have a little skip. That's all I've got time for today. Brazier is up next. I'm back tomorrow between 2 and 3 o'clock, so join me then. In the meantime, have a wonderful, happy, delightful evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The rest of today bringing big contrasts for many. Warm, hazy sunshine, but for a few, heavy, thundery downpours. Here's the bigger picture. Pincer movement going on with a couple of weather fronts. This one in particular already brought a few showers, but increasingly we're going to see big downpours develop. Very hit and miss. Many places won't see them, but we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place because where we do see thunderstorms, large hail, gusty winds and the potential for flooding is possible. Now, the showers will drift further northwards, easing off as they do, but some heavy showers possible across eastern Scotland overnight, turning generally dry across much of the south. Quite a warm, humid, sticky night with temperatures staying in the mid-teens into Friday, and it's again going to be a bit of a messy one. Some places, certainly southern Scotland, northern England, starting with some sunshine, but a fair bit of cloud for Wales and southwest England with some showers here. And then again through the day, we need to watch some heavy thundery showers breaking out, most likely over northern England, particularly to the east of the Pennines, extending into southeast Scotland. Some big downpours again possible. Some sunshine, not as warm as the last couple of days, but still into the mid-20s across the east. We'll see rain pushing into Northern Ireland, and that is a sign of a bigger change as we go through Friday evening. That rain for Wales and southwest England, and then spreading bodily eastwards. That is a weather front which will be introducing cooler and fresher air. So if you're not enjoying the heat and humidity at the moment, it's looking a lot fresher for the weekend. Still some sunshine around, especially on Saturday down the eastern side. Elsewhere, well, the sun will be interspersed with showers. Plenty of showers around on Saturday, some heavy ones moving in, but tending to zip through because it will also be very gusty, unseasonably gusty for Northern Ireland and western Scotland. And by Saturday, it's fresher everywhere. It's going to be a similar story, fresher with a mix of sunshine and showers on Sunday. Goodbye.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day